want you to turn in your Bible, if you would please, to Paul's letter to Philemon. Paul's letter to Philemon. Well, we may not get there tonight. We've surveyed Philemon in a pretty, let me turn these lights on, I always forget. We've surveyed Philemon in a verse-by-verse fashion to get just a general understanding of that brief letter that Paul wrote. And so what I'd like to do this evening is I'd like to review the basics of a biblical appeal, and then we'll go back and look at Paul's letter to discover if what we've learned thus far in our study of appeals can actually be found here, and of course we have good indication that we will, obviously, or we wouldn't be here, would we? So let's look at the basics of a biblical appeal and remind ourselves and refresh our memories. The basics center on 7 components. First, to make a godly appeal, you must have a right standing with the person to whom you're making the appeal. Right standing, of course, refers to having the right kind of a relationship with that person, usually a person who has a position of authority in your life. It means that you are what you ought to be, even if the person in authority is not what he or she ought to be. It means that, for example, you give a full day's work for a full day's pay. It means that you only take 6 days off when you're really and truly sick, not just because you don't feel good. It means that you're not suspected by your boss of to establish a relationship with that individual. Okay. Now, should a leader be a good leader? Oh, of course. But it is the responsibility of the person who follows to make sure that the relationship exists and is in good standing. Think about this. Who is about to be fired has the standing necessary to make an appeal to his boss. If the boss is currently building a case against you with HR, who enjoyed right standing would be Joseph. He obviously enjoyed a right standing with Potiphar. He obviously enjoyed a right standing with Pharaoh. Ruth enjoyed right standing with Boaz. Bathsheba came to enjoy right standing with David. Esther enjoyed right standing with her husband Ahasuerus. Daniel had right standing with the prince of the eunuchs. Nehemiah had right standing with his sovereign. He established when came the crisis that was met with an appeal. You don't find, and in the case of Abigail, you see a woman who, my goodness, she exercised some astonishing wisdom to very quickly establish a right basis for an appeal or a right standing with David. But she didn't open her mouth and start saying things to him until she okay? Trying to persuade someone to change his mind is insulting. It is tantamount to saying to that individual, you don't come right out and say it, but you're certainly implying that you're too stupid to analyze the facts correctly, and you need to have another run at this so you can get it right the next time. And that's not a good way to approach someone who performs your annual review. Therefore, forget the whole notion of ever trying to persuade someone to change his mind. An appeal is not about trying to change somebody's mind. An appeal is a request to make a new decision based upon new facts come to light or facts not previously considered. So think about it for just a moment, if you would. How is someone insulted when he is asked to consider information that is new to him, or when he is asked to consider a decision based upon a changing situation? That person is not insulted at all unless that person is looking for a reason to be insulted. And this fits in with another feature of the correct basis of an appeal. For an appeal to have the right basis and for the appeal to strengthen the position of someone in authority and not undermine that person's position, the appeal must be based upon what is in the best interests of the authority figure, not only your own best interests. Obviously, an appeal should be a win-win, okay? And if it's a win for me but not a win for him, you need to just be quiet, okay? You don't have any business making the appeal if that's the situation. For example, if a child cannot think of a good reason why it's in Dad's best interest to grant his request, he has no business whatsoever of asking his father. And I think it would be great wisdom for parents to raise their children in such a way, before you ask me for something, I want you to tell me why it's good for me to say yes to you. So that from a young age, the child begins to appreciate the dynamic that's involved and not just gimme, 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 gimme. Okay, they need to be thinking of both sides of the equation. You'll notice among these examples that I've quickly rehearsed to you and just mentioned in passing, that the appeal made is not an appeal to make a new decision after an adverse decision has been made. Sometimes an appeal can be made, it's not always an appeal made after an adverse decision. Sometimes an appeal can be made before any decision has been made. So you can, if you study your boss well enough, if you study your mom or your dad, if you study your husband, and I would think that for most wives, a husband would be a relatively easy read. I find, and here's why. Because there's an awful lot of guys who mistakenly think that they're the leaders in their marriage, and that's not the situation at all. It's that the wife runs so far out in front of him, he thinks he's the leader. But anyway, sometimes if you know the person you're dealing with well enough and you know the situation and you anticipate that there's a decision coming round the bend that may not be a good decision, you can preemptively appeal before that person in authority makes the decision, and if you make that appeal in a timely fashion, you can in fact encourage someone to make a better decision, to make the correct decision, to make a decision that is more helpful to himself or herself and also to you. And if you can anticipate well enough that your appeal leads to a first decision being made, wow, then sometimes you can have your cake and eat it too. So what biblical examples of the right basis for an appeal do we find? Again, there is, just to review, Abram seeking what God has declared he wants. Abraham makes an appeal to God, but it's based upon what he already knows God already wants. Miriam, she offered, so this is Moses' sister, she offered a solution to a problem that had just been discovered when she suggested to Pharaoh's daughter, see the child in the basket. Rahab, of course, offering protection for Israel's spies. Ruth offering herself to a man to be his wife. He was an older guy, possibly a widow by this time. Almost certainly had already been married and had children, and his wife passed, because he was not concerned about his inheritance as the closer relative to Ruth was, a younger man who had not yet sired children for his own inheritance. There was a wise woman in 2 Samuel chapter 20, the city of Abel. She made an appeal first to Joab, and then she went back inside the city to make an appeal to the elders of the city. I'll leave that to you to read sometime. You'll find it interesting. 2 Samuel chapter 20. Then, of course, there is Esther offering a remedy to deal with national intrigue. There was, I guess it would be safe to say, in Shushan the palace, there was swamp in the capital. And the leader of the swamp was an Amalekite, and Esther offered a remedy to her husband, the king, that resolved the problem once and for all. Nehemiah offering an offer of help that would further establish that would further enhance an already established policy. So a bureaucrat who was actually helping the situation, not harming the situation. Daniel offering a safe strategy to the eunuch for his approval that would enhance his position with whoever he was reporting to. Daniel again offering an answer for the king's question in Daniel chapter 2. And then of course Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they found themselves standing before a very angry Nebuchadnezzar, and the decision that they made regarding an appeal was to not make an appeal at all. Sometimes the best decision is to keep your mouth shut. You say, well, those guys were thrown in a fiery furnace. Yeah. And look what happened. When they exercised wisdom, they knew, God can do whatever he wants, and we're not worried about it, king. And we're not going to do what you ask. We're not going to do what you command. And so they were cast into the furnace that had been heated so hot that the men who cast them into the furnace were overwhelmed by the heat and died. And then Nebuchadnezzar saw the Son of God in there with them, and God wrought a great miracle. That happened because they did not make an appeal. So sometimes the best option, the wise option, is to recognize you don't have to win every battle. You just need to win the war. And sometimes the hill that is in front of you is not a hill you want to die on. Okay, so you gotta make your call. It's not always the best thing to make a biblical appeal to a person in authority over you who makes a decision that you don't like. Sometimes you just gotta clench your teeth and live with it, and live to see another day, and make an appeal about something that is substantially more important at another time. Of course, exercising your judgment. Third, so we've got right standing is required to make a biblical appeal. Right basis is required to make a godly appeal. And third, to make a godly appeal, you must take into account the right timing when making the appeal. This is a profoundly important consideration. How critical it is that we remember that in so many ways, timing is absolutely everything. Please don't call me up on a Saturday night and tell me that you're thinking about leaving the church. And would I pray for you? Saturday night, really? So you don't want me to sleep at all tonight, okay? You want me to be up and on my face before God all night long, okay? Yeah, well, this is a problem that's been developing for about a year. It's a year that the problem has been developing, but it can only be addressed Saturday night before church. Let me give you another one. From my experience, and maybe you'll recall this, my mother was a woman that was a meticulous housekeeper. She was marvelous, a tremendous cook. I could never figure out how in the world this woman could have all of these different things and not one of them thawed out from the freezer. Where you've got a roast, and you've got biscuits, and you've got this, and you've got that, and it all gets ready to put on the table at the same time. How many of you had a mom like that? I mean, it's just like bang, 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 bang. It's all ready at the same time. She was brilliant at that. But she had to have an afternoon nap. And I had to have an afternoon nap until I was about 18 months old. But from about 18 months old until I think I was 18 and really, really sick, I did not take a single nap. I just was too revved. And my mother, she would beat me to make me lay down in the bed next to her so she could go to sleep. And I would always get in trouble because I thought she was asleep, and I'd start moving off the bed, and she would wake up and spank me and lay me down, and I'd... And here's the interesting thing. When she got up from her nap and I was outside playing, it never bothered her. She had no real expectation of me laying on that bed, but she wanted me to be on that bed as she dozed off, okay? But if I wanted something from her, and Mom, can I smoke a cigar? Yeah, okay, whatever, go ahead. Mom, can I play out in the middle of the street? Oh, okay, whatever you say, okay. And if she was nodding off to sleep and almost gone, if you asked her a question, the answer was always yes. But of course, when she woke up and found out what you'd done, that kind of thing, okay? So in reality, I would ask her, she would say yes, but the timing was wrong, and I was taking advantage of her, okay? And it was clearly, it was clearly wrong. So consider two things related to the timing of your appeal. First, is your appeal, is it a legitimate appeal? Is it legitimate, okay? And second, will your appeal stand up on its own merits? Now, if both questions are properly answered in the affirmative, yes, it's a legitimate appeal, yes, it'll stand on its own merits, then why not present your appeal at a time and under situations that allow due and proper consideration? See, what do you mean by that? It means that you don't have to make the appeal as you're walking out the door with your boss Friday afternoon at 4:59. Because he's already in Lake Arrowhead in his mind. He doesn't want to talk to you. And it's not where you're camped out at the front entrance Monday morning at 8 o'clock as he's coming in, because he's already got in his mind the things that he has to set in motion, the things that he has to, calls he has to make, perhaps some emails he has to respond to. And the last person he wants to see is you, where you're basically like a vulture on a fence, waiting to pick at his bones. That's not the right time. That's just not the right time. Any of you have people that work for you that, and I'm not asking you to give up, confidential HR information, but you've got people that really, their timing, when they make requests of you, their timing is really, really bad. Anybody? Rick? Yeah, because I saw you smiling back there. I thought, yeah. As soon as I started talking about timing, this big grin is on his face. Yeah. But the solution to that problem is you just marry her and the problem goes away, right? Ooh. I'm in trouble. When you're making an appeal, you don't want to be like the used car dealer who wants people to make impulsive decisions. You don't want your boss to make an impulsive decision that he'll regret later. Certainly, if you're making a biblical appeal, you want a well thought out, considered decision based upon the facts and evidence, as you're praying like crazy that God will work in that person's life to give you a good decision. And the reason right timing of an appeal is so challenging for some people is because we live in a world of selfishness. We live in a world of inconsideration. I went last night over to the Pasadena Hilton over on Los Robles because I wanted to meet the Sage of South Central. Anybody here not know who the Sage of South Central is other than Jade and Jordan? Anybody? Larry Elder. Okay, Larry Elder, and you ever heard of Dr. Sebastian Gorka? Okay, mustache, Hungarian, used to be President Trump's national security assistant advisor, and then Hugh Hewitt. Anyway, and what's the name of the where's Harley? What's the name of the host for that event? Jennifer Horn. Yes, she was a very sharp gal, and so I went there, and just an illustration of people how totally inconsiderate they are. I'm right in front of Neil Gorsuch. He's signing the books at the table, and I have my phone. I'm getting ready to take a picture, and a woman walks up. She looks at me and gets directly in front so she can get the picture. And so I said, loud enough for her to hear, "Really?" And she stayed there. Click, 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 click. Wow, this is not cool. I mean, you can go into foreign countries and people won't do that. I mean, not knowingly anyway. And so we live in a culture where people are basically inconsiderate, and they don't even frequently think about when the timing of their request would be good for the person they're asking. Minutes before the worship service is not a good time to ask me for a personal favor. Why? Because I won't remember. I promise you I'll forget. And I won't forget intentionally. I'll forget because I've got all these other things on my mind. How many of you have noticed that I can implement a change in the order of service and it takes me 5 years to get it? And the one that constantly and continuously muffs it is the person who changed the schedule, the order of service. Why? Because I just have other things on my mind. I'm beyond capacity to focus on who does what before who else. And somebody needs to literally lead me around. Okay, talk, Pastor. Now go back to your seat, Pastor. Okay, which is essentially what Lee Moyer does on Sunday morning, and what Rick Raimundo does frequently on Sunday night when he's not, trying to get over a cold. But so timing is very, very important. You don't walk up to a bride moments before her wedding ceremony and ask her to do something for you. What? But people do that. Do you allow? Here's another one, and it starts when children are really young. How many of you, when you were kids, when two grown-ups are talking, you do not interrupt? And you would not be, and if you're excited and you forget, you would be, wait till I'm finished. Conversation, a reasonable amount of time, pause, yes, what can I do for you? It helps the child to be treated like he or she is not the center of the universe, right? But nowadays, you could be talking about how are we going to overthrow President Trump? And so a kid walks up and you stop that conversation and say, yes? So no matter how important the conversation is, okay, adults will stop talking so that they can attend to the kid. That's not good training. And it's terrible to raise kids that way, so that by the time they get to the place where they're beginning to learn how to make an appeal, they develop no consciousness of timing. There is a time to do something, and then there is a time that you need to wait until it's more opportune time for the person that you want to ask. And there's other things that figure in. For example, fatigue is a factor, schedule is a factor, finances is a factor, mood is a factor, and many other things, making the timing of your appeal critical. And these factors they're not your fatigue, and they're not your finances, and they're not your mood, and they're not your many other things. I'm referring to the fatigue of the person you're appealing to, the schedule of the person you're appealing to, the finances of the person you're appealing to, and the mood of the person you're appealing to. So a teenager wants to tap his dad for 20. He probably doesn't do so on the 29th of the month. That's just dumb. Why? Well, Dad is, you run out of paycheck before you run out of week, And what the kid should do is check with Dad on like the 2nd. See, a higher likelihood of Dad coming across with a little, or being willing to negotiate for some work program to trade it off. So timing has to do with your estimate that the person that you're appealing to has the opportunity to fully consider and reflect on your request without the pressure of time and without a sense of urgency coming from an emergency, if that is at all possible. Of course, sometimes it's not possible. Granted, sometimes it's not possible. But I have a stock answer for any request I hear that I cannot fully consider. The answer is no. And many others, I think, in leadership answer the same way, as well they should. If they feel like they're being stampeded a little bit, or they're being bulldozed a little bit, and somebody's trying to overwhelm them with a sense of urgency that you're not convinced really exists, the answer is just no. No. Well, can we just talk about it? No, I'm going to eat supper right now. Bye. Click. Abraham's timing with God was right. With God, the timing is always right. Amen. Miriam's timing with Pharaoh's daughter was the right time. Rahab's timing with the two spies was right. Ruth's timing with Boaz was, with Naomi's help, was the right timing. Abigail's timing with David was right. Esther's timing with her husband was right. Nehemiah's timing with the king was right. Daniel's timing on both occasions that we considered was right. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they both realized they were both lacking in standing at the time and had no right timing, so they initiated no appeal and went to the fiery furnace, and it turned out great. Okay, so let me make one additional comment about the timing of a biblical appeal, if I may. A biblical appeal should not be communicated, in my opinion. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that says this. I'm not quoting a chapter and a verse. I'm just relating to you what I think would be wise for us to consider. And I think most of you here in the auditorium would agree with me on this. A biblical appeal should not be communicated via technology. Email. Got to ask you a favor. Not by email. A really important one. Not by text. If you're making an appeal, if you're just like just a little favor, hey, can I meet you in 15 minutes instead of 10? Yeah, sure, that's not a big deal. But when you're talking to a person who has a position of authority in your life, and you're making an appeal, a real appeal, if at all possible, your appeal needs to be communicated when there is FaceTime, a personal encounter. I recommend that it take place after a handshake, after a pleasant smile, and after personal words are exchanged. Perhaps in case of an emergency, you might appeal to somebody via Skype. You got to talk with your Uncle George in upstate New York, and it's very, very important, and you simply can't fly there tomorrow. Okay. So I would suggest you get him on Skype, look at him, let him see you. You got a good connection. And the first thing that comes out of your mouth, I really want to apologize for doing it this way, because I really need to be standing in front of you and Aunt Minnie right now. But that was simply impossible. If at all possible. As well, your appeal should be made in a private setting. And without witnesses of any kind. Now, when we get to Paul's letter to Philemon, he did it in a very public setting, okay? But there are other reasons why Paul did it. But most of the time, if you're appealing, and he wasn't appealing to someone who had authority over him, he was making a peer-to-peer appeal. But if you're appealing to an authority figure, I would recommend most strenuously a private setting without witnesses of any kind, okay, that would make the person that you're appealing to feel like you are in any way applying pressure or trying to put him or her on the spot. How many of you parents remember situations in when your kids asked you in front of somebody because they very definitely wanted to put pressure on you, okay? Mom, can I go over to Larry's house to spend the night? And of course, there's Larry's dad right there. Okay. And your son is doing that with the express intention of taking away from you the freedom to make the decision. Okay. But the answer must of course be no. It must be no. It must be no. You cannot encourage a kid to pressure you into, and now that'll be a lifelong process of learning and teaching. But you can't apply pressure or put a person on the spot. You can't let somebody apply pressure to you or put you on the spot. Children should never be allowed to ask their parents for something in front of their friends or any other adult, because that's really, and they don't have to be taught this. Kids are just clever. They're smart. And they're far more determined. Their wills are stronger than their parents most of the time. But when they try to get you in front of somebody, that's manipulation, and it's designed to make the parents feel like they're bad guys if they don't give the kid what he wants. How many of you have been there? Am I the only one? Okay. Sarah didn't do that very often. Didn't do it because it never worked. Would anybody like to know how many times candy that she chose in the checkout line was bought for her during the course of her entire life? Anybody want to know? Not one time. That's a bad one to get started, isn't it? Unless you want your child to be down on the floor and you're looking around to see whether or not you can correct your child. And in the grocery store, you can't, see. So you don't want to let that get started. So timing is important, and I think we'll stop right there. Right standing, right basis, right timing to make a biblical appeal. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications desired if we stop right there and continue on, Lord willing?